Yeah. Okay. So with that, let's get into their personality. So yeah, like you said, Ents are what they're called in Lord of the Rings. D&D changed them to Treant, which I actually like better as an Ent.
I do too. Yeah.
Probably from, but they are the same thing. There really is no
They're
difference from what we can tell.
They're very chill, unless you make them angry.
Okay. So yeah, your first personality is they're chill.
Yeah. So basically most treants are very docile, kind of like like if you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you, kind of like things. So they kind of vibe, kind of like by themselves. They kind of like talk with their other trees.
Sometimes.
Sometimes they'll like wander their territory and like the forest that they're supposed to be protecting and stuff. They'll talk to like the fey animals like unicorns and other stuff. They're just there. They're very chill beings. But let's say you make them mad and you chop down a bunch of trees unnecessarily, or you just start burning stuff. They get angry and they become very hostile towards the people that are doing that.
They can.
They
can. We need to remember here that there's lots of different society of treants. There's lots of different, and there are individuals. They have a good intelligence, a good wisdom. They vary from treant to treant. So what one treant might be like is it could be different than another. So what we really need to talk about is like the fundamental aspects of their character. So when we say hostile, they may not be hostile.
I mean, they want to protect all of their
Right.
force. So because that's their kind of like their job.
That's a motivation.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But in general, in terms of their personality, when they're younger, they're more reckless. The Monster Manual says this. But I would like to add that this is compared to other treants, not compared to humans. A young treant by no means would be reckless by our standards. If anyone's read The Wheel of Time, I don't think you have not read The Wheel of Time. There's a character named Loyal. He's in Ogier. Anyway, that book outlines kind of how this works really well. When you have this society or creature that is quote unquote reckless compared to its other kind, but in reality they aren't reckless at all. For example, a reckless treant might be a treant that actually talks to someone or wakes up and just has a conversation. That might be reckless because other treants might be like, "What are you doing? You should be thinking about. You should not be meddling. Just go to sleep. Contemplate life." So reckless does not mean they're just jumping into battles and killing people or.
That would be scary.
No
if there
treant
was
would
a
do that.
treant like that.
It would be.
That would be scary. All the old ones are like, ugh.
Yeah,
Treant.
they'd be possessed. It just is against their nature.
What are you doing, young tree?
Nature.
What?
I feel like there's gonna be a lot of puns.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of puns.
Okay. But in general, so whether they're hostile, whether they're not, forget how they would react to another being. What they like to do in general is they don't hunt, they don't do all these things. They just sit there and contemplate life.
So they're kind of like philosophers, they're kind of like the thinking man, but in tree form. They kind of just sit there like,
Yeah.
that bird looks nice today.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of sits there like, man.
And they probably aren't animated. They're probably sitting there just completely motionless and
thinking.
aware of their surroundings and just thinking. Yeah. And they're happy to do that. They are very much happy to do that.
When a tree falls, does it actually make sound? They're one of those.
They'll spend hundreds of years thinking about that.
Does it make sound? And they just, they sit there and think about that until something happens to them, or they just think about something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Stinks, actually.
And with that, so they believe when they die, they become a tree. So when a treant dies, it's not that they are chopped up. They will just resort back to tree form. And they are aware of this, and so when they believe that when they die, they're just forever dreaming as a tree, and so they don't fear death in that sense because they like to do that anyway.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, it's
they're actually, I wouldn't really care. So they'll so that basically means they will never flee.
Okay, well, let's not get into combat strategies yet. Remember, we're just talking about personality now.
I like combat.
We'll get into the implications of everything we talk about as we go. We're on episode 8 and we're still figuring that out. One at a time. Personality. Okay. So they're not scared of death. Before we get into their motivations, we should also say that they absolutely hate fire.
Oh, yeah, with a passion. Also Minecraft players.
And the reason they hate fire is greatly linked to their motivations. So unless you have any more things specifically about the personality, we should definitely get into their motivations.
No, I was going to bring up the fire thing. They actually hate, well, I guess this is a certain part of their personality. They don't really like to talk to things that are, like, that can only live to, like, a century. Like, they won't even, like, they'll like, full on ignore, like, a human that's standing next to his, like, old elf companion. You know, the elf and the Treant are, like, talking, the Treant just looks at the human. You literally don't know anything, so I'm not even going to talk to you.
That's true, but let's save that for the enemies and allies section. Right now, we're just talking about their personality unrelated to anything else, right?
Yeah.
Societal structure is about them with themselves. Personality and enemies and allies are with other creatures. So right now, it's just their personality. In general.
The gist of their personality is they like to sit and think a lot.
Yes.
Basically it. So now let's get on to their motivations, which basically is they want to protect the forest that they're in, you know? So, like, that's kind of like their job. If you think about it, they're kind of like shepherds of trees. I think they said that in, like, Lord of the Rings, that the answer, like, yeah, we, like, protect our forests.
Yeah, you know? That's their main motivation.
That's kind of like their main purpose.
They're protectors of the forest. That's, like, their big motivation. And, like, that basically defines them. That will have implications on every other category of our discussion. That they're protectors of the forest. That's their whole purpose. And so, like, even though they don't fear death, that doesn't mean they don't understand their purpose and value living, because they know that if they die, that's one less protector of the forest, and they very much value the forest. They greatly fear the death of the forest.
Oh, yeah.
They don't fear the death of them as an individual, but as the forest, they care for so much that they know that they should be alive to protect it. But they're not just a protector; they're also a caretaker. So you might see them. Well, you probably won't see them doing this if you're just a normal humanoid, but as an omniscient being, you might see them like taking a baby bird and like putting it back in its nest, or like trimming the foliage to make sure it doesn't get overgrown, you know, stuff like that. And then they go back to contemplating.
Wait, but when they're trimming like the forest or like the bushes, like, oh my god, oh my.
No, it's like a haircut.
Oh no.
This is a little far-fetched, but in my research, I did come across an idea that they may cause controlled forest fires, because those are actually very healthy for the forest. Like, they might be like, all right, we got a forest fire in quadrant 4 on this date. Make sure you're all out of there so we can, get that going.
The quadrant 4, like the bushes and the trees, like, well, man, what are you doing?
Well, the bushes and trees aren't living, so like that just contributes to the living thing. Like it's an ecosystem.
I think they're living.
They might be living.
They might be living. The trees might know that, and then the trees are like, "Look, man, please, I got a wife and kids. They're back there. Please, no." And then the tree's like, "It's for the forest." throws like
yes, maybe. But if there was a situation in which the bush was talking back to them, they wouldn't kill it. They'd be like, "Oh, I understand."
Forest, though.
No, well, they're not like utilitarian. Like they're not gonna just start. Like,
I know.
They are. Yeah, they just care for the forest.
They're nice caretakers, right?
Yeah.
So they're not gonna be freaking like, it's.
The best way to protect you is to murder you all. It's like no. They're you can't hurt yourselves if you're dead. No, they're not doing that.
Exactly.
They just care for the forest. That's their main motivation. So that's why they hate fire, because fire is a huge danger to of a forest that's just made of wood and
also just
leaves.
Hurts too.
It might hurt as well.
I mean, have you ever touched fire?
I have touched fire. I'm unsure how strong of a nervous system the Treant has,
they probably have a nervous system.
They have a magical one to some extent.
And the magic's like, hey, this is burning you. Kind of like, it's hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly don't think they do feel it. And I'm gonna go off Lord of the Rings again. Do you remember when they burned that one tree?
Yeah, and then the trees were like, oh.
Yeah, and what? And
Mega.
it was during the battle, and then the river came, and then he just randomly ran up and like threw his head in the water. But he did. But if you really look at like the body language of him doing that, it was very much like it wasn't like I'm on fire. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, okay, I got that over with. You know what I mean? Very different.
Oh yeah, wait, everybody popped his head back up. He's like, oh yeah. You know,
yeah.
He's like,
all right, I'm good.
Yeah. It's kind of
because like the fire would eventually kill him, but if you get it out, he's like, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah, he's good. So it's kind of like catching your hair on fire, I guess. Like you don't feel it, but you know it's a problem. Your hair's on fire, so you're like, you know, so you're kind of like worried.
Well, it would. There are people in the world who have their disabled nervous system, so like they'll accidentally put their hand on the stove, and then it'll just they'll be like, "You smell some." Oh my! And their hand's just burnt off.
What smells like bacon? Looks at his hand. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's a real disability.
I actually met someone who had that. They did that with their elbow.
Oh.
They have like a giant burn. It was.
Yeah, no, it's a really bad thing to have. So if treants really are painless, then that maybe they are subject to accidentally hurting themselves. But they also are made out of like bark and tree, and like they're fine.
I mean, it would take a while for them to burn alive, I think.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Okay, so their motivation in general is to protect their forest and just take care of it.
Or are they just huggers?
They're tree huggers, but they are a tree.
So do they just like to hug?
They hug themselves.
That sounds wrong, but
yeah, that is. Anyway. Okay, so let's get into their societal structure. Their personality and motivations are pretty simple, but the implications of them are actually really interesting. So let's get into that.